Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Hello there. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson. I'm your host for this show, and I am so excited about that. You know, I had a friend tell me that he used to just love Fate Magazine this afternoon when I posted about my show with Linda. And I was like, well, why did you used to love it? We're still in publication. We've been doing this for 71 years. He was stunned. I don't know why. But you know what? If you too used to love Fate Magazine, you can love it again. If you go to fatemag.com, you can check on your subscription status, renew one. You can see some of the new issues, and I'm going to tell you that the owner is fantastic about getting old issues to you. I had a guest who had written and submitted, did not know she had been published. I mentioned it to Phyllis. That next week, my guest had 2 fresh copies of the magazine edition that her story had appeared in. She didn't even know she had been published. So how cool is that? We take care of people. And with that, I am so excited about tonight's guest because she is kind of what Fate Mag is all about. Linda Godfrey has written last count I had was 18 books. I think there's a new one coming, if it's not already out. She is a brilliant lecturer. She is someone who has over 25 years of research under her belt on a topic that most people would run from. She is just fierce, and it's amazing because she does not look like she would be fierce, ferocious, and out there getting those answers. But you know what? This is one tough lady, and I'm so excited to be able to welcome her to Fate. Hi, Linda Godfrey. Thank you for being here. Are you with me?
I am. How are you tonight, Kat?
I'm doing well, and I am so pleased to have you join me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm tickled, too, because I have a huge collection of Fate magazines, and going back to some of those old ones. And they're just so wonderful. Every once in a while, I'll pick one up and, something just fresh will hit me that even though it's a 30-year-old magazine, I had somehow never noticed before. And it's usually when it's just what I need, And I've also met Phyllis Galdi and was given a little tour through their offices a few years ago when I was speaking in Baltimore. And she was there, one of the attendees. So, yeah, I'm just really tickled to be on the show with you tonight.
Well, thank you. I absolutely love Fate magazine. And I was so very honored when she called and asked if I would host this show. Because, wow, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was absolutely tripping over myself to say yes. But it's been a fantastic experience because so many people have a long history with this magazine.
Mm-hmm, they do. And it's so fun, too, when I'll be paging through it and I see something by someone that at the time when it came out, I didn't know them from anybody. And now they're often, well-known or popular in the genre. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there they were way back when.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does. I think it has those connections for a lot of people.
Well, it's really funny because all these people that I booked to come on here, I'll get halfway through the interview and they're like, well, I was in Fate. I had an article in Fate magazine. I write for Fate or wrote for Fate. And I'm just like, synchronicity abounds.
Exactly.
Just abounds. And
I am in the Synchronicity book by Marie D. Jones, 1111. It's is the title of it. Yeah. So I know what that is too. Definitely.
Absolutely. I'm in one of her books too. And the story of an experience that I had at the old Paulding jail is included in her latest book. Or it was her latest book a couple of months ago. You know how prolific she is.
Oh, yes.
She is always writing. I love that. But that's a good book, though, that Synchronicity, the 1111 book.
It is, yeah. And I had episodes of it. It was driving me crazy before it was ever announced or I ever read about it anywhere. I thought it was just me because I was having weird experiences of 1111 showing up everywhere. And I was at kind of a crossroads in my life at the time. And I felt like it was having to bear on some of these experiences. And then I go, nah, you're just imagining. It's just letters on a license plate or a street sign or an envelope or whatever. And then I started reading I realized that there were other people who had it, and it was just one of those amazing moments when, things are connected, and
yes.
There's just more to that whole concept than we ever could know.
Well, what brought you to her attention to include that?
We had been corresponding about a couple of other things, and I had happened to tell her that story, and I don't remember exactly how. I might even have contacted her once she wrote an article or something on it. I don't remember exactly, but we'd had some former contact, and then she asked me if she could feature that in her book.
She is so cool.
She is very, very smart, bright person.
Well, and you know what? She's kind also.
I think so, yes.
Kindness is a good thing.
It's a gift. Mm-hmm.
And that sense of humor doesn't hurt either.
No, that's right. Never does.
Well, now, as interesting as it is for you to have had that synchronistic experience with Marie, because that was synchronicity too.
Mm-hmm.
What on earth brought someone like you into the field of cryptic biological study?
You know, that is the first question everybody, everywhere I go, asks. And
well,
so,
you know why? Because you don't look like that's what you would do.
I know. I've been to talks where, you know, I stand up and somebody says, "Oh, I thought you'd look like a goth or something." And you know,
I just mean,
not that there's anything wrong with that at all. It's just not my look.
Right.
I don't feel like putting on costumes to portray myself as something I'm not. I am who I am. I'm a former, I have a degree in art education,
mm-hmm.
and it was through kind of a long, torturous journey with that I ended up at the newspaper, ended up being a reporter, and thus ended up being the person who announced that people on this road outside of Elkhorn, Wisconsin were saying what they called a werewolf. You know, it just was a series of paths that I took. And so I think I am going to have to write the memoir, but my agent and other people keep laughing at me when I say, I want to write it, but I don't want it to be about me. And they're like, Linda, that's kind of what a memoir is. You know,
that's funny. Linda, that's funny.
I mean it because my fear, and I shouldn't state that I have a fear about this. That's never a good thing to do. But my thought in my whole decision process has been, I've always wanted it to be about the witnesses
yes.
and these creatures and their association or non-association, whatever's there. It's their stories, and the creatures are as they describe them. And I'm the recorder. I'm the student. I've been really reluctant to have a book that focuses on myself because that's not how I see it. You know, I see it as something much bigger than me and belonging to many other people. People I'm sure that I haven't met yet.
Well, I would agree with that because I know when I started reading your work, I was just kind of like, really? Because I'm fascinated by dogmen. I met the guys from the National Dogman Association or North American Dogman Association in Lexington, Kentucky 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And was just amazed, equally amazed by I don't even know, it's like a mannequin, but it was a dogman mannequin that
mm-hmm.
they had there that was ostensibly to size. And I didn't even come up to its chest.
Yeah,
and that was based on witness reports.
Yeah, generally 6 to 7 feet tall. Most reports are. Yeah, definitely. It's sort of an intimidating thing to think about. But you know, it's not like I'm going out having hand-to-hand combat with these things.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, you know, I'm not the right size. I don't have that skill set. But it's something that I suppose makes me seem like I must be really unusual. To me, it's just normal myself. You know, it's just something I was interested in. I continue to be curious about it 27 years later. That's what keeps me going. And it's the people that keep me going, really, you know. And whether or not we end up solving this big mystery, I don't know if that will happen in my lifetime. But it won't if nobody studies it or keeps track of it.
Exactly.
Keeps the trail going. So that's really what I feel kind of is my my role in it.
Well, I appreciate that because where I live, I don't have the opportunity, or I'm not familiar of incidents with dogmen or werewolves, because that's how they were perceived at first, right?
Well, people would say to me, you know, I don't know if there is such a thing as a werewolf, but if there were, this is what it would be or look like, because they would describe something that was pretty much exactly a German Shepherd or a wolf, large ones, walking and running on their hind legs, sometimes
yes.
stooped, in posture, but running or walking very well. There wasn't anything really supernatural about it overtly by any means, except when people kind of engaged with them a little bit, either through their windshield window, looking at them out that way, or sometimes they would be at the side of the car or standing in the woods, whatever. If they felt engaged with them at all, they usually felt like they were getting some sort of a message, not in the Queen's English, but just impressions, like, I could get you if I wanted to. I mean, fairly aggressive,
Yes,
feeling.
that's what I hear.
If I wanted to, I could jump on your car, on the roof of your car if I wanted to. If you tell anybody you saw me, I'll find you, that kind of thing. And that scared people, I think, more than just seeing a large animal that, certainly looked like it could have had the power to attack them or eat them or whatever. But instead, it was the combination of suddenly understanding that here was something they didn't think existed. They did not think that there could be large carnivores that would send them mental impressions, and also to seem as interested in them as they were in finding out what it was. They felt like they're going through their imaginary flip charts trying to think what animal this could be, and at the same time they sort of perceive that it's just really looking at them and trying to suss them out as well. And that scares people because it's not what you naturally observe with a wild animal. If to give you an example, my husband is a very avid deer hunter, and he's been sitting in his stand and had a bear go by, not that far away from him, and it just sort of half acknowledged him, just kind of kept going, and that can you imagine that happening, and then the bear suddenly turning its head and saying, I could get you in that tree stand if I wanted to. You never hear that from deer hunters or bear hunters. No, either one.
Although they could.
Yeah,
they climb. So
that's what scares people the most, and that's where it does seem, if there's a place where there is a paranormal aspect, that's where you'd see it. Now, there are other things that look like upright canines or different sorts of canines. And I often liken it to just in the same way that ghosts of humans will appear and they'll look different. Sometimes it's a voice, sometimes it's a shadow, sometimes it's a full-bodied specter, and we all know that these aren't the human itself, that there's, or sometimes they'll manifest in a human that is intact, and take over part of it for a while. So that we think maybe could happen too. So just as it's very complex when humans have other appearances and sort of mimics, whatever you want to call them, that then you can maybe understand why perhaps the animal kingdom does too. Because the other thing is that if this were a totally natural thing for them to be walking and running in the wild on their hind legs, we should have some sort of official knowledge of that with all the the wolf herds or the wolf packs that are out there at this time, when you've got them collared and studied by all sorts of, every state has their official wildlife center, there's national, and they are studying these animals and watching them. Sometimes they're chasing them in helicopters, and they can see them perfectly how they're moving around. And whenever I get a chance, I've even talked to the man who runs the Isle Royale, Michigan program, moose and wolf herd program. And I always say to any of these people that I can find to talk to, have you ever, in any of the studies, observed or had an official observation of a wolf running or walking upright along with the pack, or maybe better yet, the whole pack? And they'll always say no. In all the ones we've observed, in ones we've had, in private shelters, in ones we've tracked, we have never seen that. So at least if they have,
so that's one.
Yes,
one thing checked off.
Right, and I still try, and there should be somebody. The only one that ever gave me sort of a positive answer was I was talking to kind of a grizzled elder trapper up in the UP at a bar. My husband was with me, and I was kind of taking a tour of some of the places where these things had been seen at the time. And I asked him, because he talked about being a trapper, and he said, no, the only thing is that sometimes if they feel you're closing in on them, they'll rear up for a minute, maybe to kind of convince you that they're bigger than they look. But it's not like a thing where they're walking or running on their hind legs. They're just sort of rearing up as sort of a bluster move in my of what they're doing. They want to show that they're big too, and maybe it's sort of a territorial move, which I do believe that they are territorial against other life forms. Yeah, that it seems to be something prevalent after all these years that I've been able. One little thing you can kind of figure out. And yet they're seen alone most of the time. Once in a while, there's a really wild night in Maine, Palmyra, Maine, that I call the Maine Wolf Pack, and that was in my book called. Let's see. Sometimes they're so similar. Hang on 1 second. It is.
That's okay. Yeah. You know what? While you look, I'm going to take us to break.
Okay, great.
And we'll be right back.
Great. It's Real Wolfmen, by the way.
Yay. Okay. Well, we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Real Wolfmen. Oh, sure.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour, and I'm so glad that you are back with us. Linda and I were having such a discussion that I just about let that break slip right by, and, probably shouldn't do that. Linda, welcome back. We were scrambling for your book title, and you got it before I did. So, thank you.
I have it right. Well, you're welcome, and I apologize. It's just that this particular one has a subtitle that I stumble over because it's just kind of a big sentence, but the full one is Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America. So that people know that these are the real things that are seen, whether or not they're wolfmen or werewolves or something totally unexpected remains to be seen yet. But there are true encounters, people who have true stories about what they've observed in modern America, not like 3 centuries ago in France. It's something that's widespread, it's a phenomenon, it's a thing, it's happening today.
And it's happening frequently.
It is. It's
in every part of the U.S.
Right, and Canada and Meso and South America too. Mm-hmm. And other parts of the world. I've had reports from the Virgin Islands and Europe. It's just very widespread. Germany is one where I've had several really interesting ones.
Well, Germany has all the Frankenstein stuff, too. and the vampires and everything.
They do, but you know where they show up is the commonality there, because that's almost always what I'm looking for is commonality. What else does this attach itself to? And I discovered that most of the reports that I got had some association with one of the military installations, usually from World War II. Nazis had directives from Hitler to do all kinds of occult things, and he was especially fascinated with wolves. He had a whole military regiment named after the wolves, and they were kind of an elite force. And so it's interesting that since that time, and these stories all come from since there was the occupation after World War II, people are still seeing, they all have these werewolf, quote unquote, legends associated with them, and people are still seeing them.
Do you think that Hitler actually had people working with him who could create or conjure werewolves, or are they natural, in your opinion, with everything that you have heard, are they natural beings that are just simply malformed, or are they a separate species?
Well,
what is your take?
As far as those military type installations,
yes, the military ones.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Hitler was tampering with genetics in its simpler form that it was back then. Whatever was known, that he had scientists working very hard on being able to take something like a large wolf and give it a human intelligence and maybe make it able to run on its hind legs. I don't know what advantage exactly it would be, but a lot of people think that that's what he was going for. And we know that there were big biolabs happening. And if they did have animals that were being used, it's possible some could have escaped and maybe hung around and were able to mate with local canines. Who knows? Lots of things that you could think about and surmise there. But the fact that these military installations all have these legends about there being some kind of a super canine, sometimes not speaking but sending the messages, and seeming to have almost special powers and being interested in certain people too. That's another thing. In my mind, I can't rule it out, because genetics manipulation is a real thing.
Yes,
we're much farther ahead in it now than I'm sure we were in any part of it back in the World War II days. But it's not just something people made up. It's something that really happened. And I believe, as a rule of thumb, anytime we hear about something like that or know of any real scientific advance, it's generally minimum 5 years late to
Yes,
more.
I agree.
It's been a long time since they knew about it and first began. By the time we hear about anything that is finished and presented or begin to see it, it's been happening for a while, and there are probably more innovations that we just don't have any idea of what they might be.
Well, and like my sources, I'm sure that yours are, who tell me this, the minimum 5 years. Just like with the GPS thing, ours are not accurate to the degree that they are capable of, because the military needs to be able to specify it's, get down to the nitty gritty on the latitude longitude thing, and weaponry as well. But I too have been told a minimum of 5 years.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the going figure, and it could be much longer.
Yes.
That's just what it for sure is. And I mean, there's kind of a really creepy, scary story in my new book, I Know What I Saw, that involves maybe head transplants. And,
really? Because I have not gotten to that.
Yeah, it's a story about a man who was jogging on one of those kind of rubber tracks that some places have for joggers, makes it easier on your hips and legs. And he had he saw two different things. The first time he was jogging, and he noticed a couple of dogs running toward him, and they got closer and closer, and he realized these were very big, and he's kind of wondering about them. And as they neared one another, what struck him was these dogs, which are sort of like big German shepherdish things, were not wavering from one another in terms of their tracks or where they were looking. They were like a perfectly matched set on the same brain wave that was keeping them trotting along in perfect position, which would be almost impossible. You know, one way to tell dogs from wolves is that if you've got tracks, the dog tracks will just kind of meander all over. The wolf tracks will be straight. They have their business. They just go to it. But the dogs will be sniffing this, run here, you know. And there was nothing like that to indicate that they were natural dogs. They didn't look exactly like wolves, but they were in this perfect lockstep. And they went by this jogger without even paying any attention to him. They just kept their noses high and kept going. And actually, he had written me this whole thing about it, wrote it all out in longhand. And then I had another letter from him that said, well, there was another thing that happened before that. And I think he was reluctant to tell me this one because this is the really mind-boggling one. There were 4 men who were coming toward him, this time on the track. And he was watching them jog, and unlike the dogs, which were like perfect in their steps and just extremely well set in what they were doing, he said these seemed to be a little out of step. Some of them were sort of dragging a foot or leaning a little, like they didn't know exactly how their bodies were working. And he was very curious. They got very close, and they had their hoods up on their sweatsuits, so they couldn't see too well at first, but and they looked like he could see the rest of their bodies, and they looked like very well built, very healthy young men, muscular, you know, and that was also made it more curious as to why they seemed to be sort of flopping around here and there. And then one of them turned and looked at him, and he just about fell over on the rubber track because he said it was the face of like a 70-year-old man on these on these youthful bodies, and they all were like that. And the only thing I could think of to possibly explain that was something like a head transplant. And there was a Russian scientist who, just a couple of years ago, as I was writing this, and maybe even more recently since it's gone to print, announced that he had performed all the work necessary to do a head transplant, and would be doing one extremely shortly. Now, we haven't heard in the news about that. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Especially with a secretive government, you know, such as the USSR, which it isn't anymore, Russia, I should call it. So that thought is really scary, but it helps make sense as to why, you know, if you've got your head on a fresh, nice new body, it's just still all the nerve pathways would necessarily have to take time before everything lined up. It's almost miraculous to think that. And again, this isn't positive either, but it's miraculous to think that a human head could be joined to another body, and all the complicated, you know, you think of the enzymes of the human body, the veins, the blood veins, the brain, everything that has to tie together for us to work.
Well, the electroconnectivity.
Yes.
Alone.
Yes, exactly. How would that all work? Well, you would definitely be probably flopping your feet and bending a little and, you know, losing control if you were doing that. And it also makes sense. Let's say you're an extremely rich billionaire and, you know, you still feel pretty good except you've got some really bad disease or condition that's going to kill you very soon. And you figure, well, maybe I might as well as not try to get transplanted to a better body. You know, you're going to pick a body that's young and healthy and will give you much less chance of having to go through it again, right? So the head, and yet you probably couldn't do a lot with the head itself, I would think, other than plastic surgery. Yeah, that's just myself, just guessing. Again, I'm no scientist. I'm a lifelong student, and I think about things. I conjecture. I have no scientific reputation to uphold. I
understand.
And I think sometimes, you know, it leaves you freer to think about this stuff, you know, and go at it from all angles, because I don't have any special need for it to turn out one way or the other. I just tell what I see or what people have told me. And that's how this was with this. But I think about these men jogging, with the wrinkled faces and the junior athlete bodies, and it's just like, oh my, what else is there that we don't know about?
Well, I would venture to guess a lot more that we don't really want to know we don't know about.
That's probably true.
There's some weird stuff. And, one of the things I think that we can go back to relevant to that experience would be Hitler, because he was doing so much genetic testing, because in his mind he had lab rats. I mean, he was not a very user-friendly guy.
No.
He had the perfect environment to do these things
and
in his little world.
Yeah, he had the top-level scientists that came over and made our space program. He was rich in talent, and he had gathered all these fortunes wrongly from people that he captured and imprisoned and worse. And so he was able to do these things, and if anybody was close to it, it would have been him. So, it's scary. Scary to think of that. And scary that so many of these scientists that were in on these just horrific sounding experiments were then brought to the United States and their knowledge transferred to our science programs.
A little freaky.
Yes.
I did like, the theater, arena, whatever, in Huntsville, Alabama is the Von Braun Civic Center.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not named after an American scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found that odd that they were elevated to such a level when basically they were POWs coming here. This was their choice.
Right.
You can be toast where you are, or you can come here and help us. And they chose to come here, obviously. But
Werner von Braun was like the movie star of the scientists, and in every way. And who knows what all really was transmitted from him that the public still has not been told about.
Yes. But he was a genius on propulsion systems.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, but again, you don't know where that information came from.
No, and it's hard to say. I don't know if you've read the most recent book. There's a kind of a funny kind of little anecdotal thing that I put in there that we talked before about how everything is connected and how like in quantum physics, if you're connected to something once, you always will be, that sort of thing, and how these things sort of thicken up. Well, I have a little story about my grandmother, which sounds very boring, but it's not. My grandmother.
I will vouch for that.
Well, my grandmother Elsie was a farm wife who went through 5th grade, was the farthest she got in her education, because she was the oldest of like 7 kids, and she had to quit school and work so they could go to school. She kind of had her life sacrificed. And when World War II came, my uncle, her son, was over there in occupied Germany. He did quite a bit. He actually received an award for improving the speed for the the Berlin airlift, and had met a bunch of people, and there were lots of German people wishing to emigrate quickly to the United States at that time for various reasons. They may have been, kind of with the wrong bunch, and then all of a sudden they're in occupied Germany and afraid of what's going to happen to them. Well, there was a lady that was trying to get my grandmother to sponsor her. That they met through my uncle's friend over there. And she was always writing my grandmother, and I found the letters. My grandmother passed a few years ago, and actually both of them did. The other one had even more mind-boggling discoveries. But I found this letter from this woman to my grandmother, and the first part of it was just sort of usual. They had a lot of privations during that period right after World War II. They weren't getting supplies. She said, we're thinking of eating the rats. I had to make myself a coat out of a blanket, that kind of thing. And this is a very well-educated young woman who actually had worked in one of those installations one of the Nazi installations in the North Sea, where they were keeping, if they wanted to keep it private, they would use a North Sea island. And that's where she had been employed. So then the next page of this letter went, so have you seen UFOs? Do you know what UFOs are about? The Russians say they invented them, but they say they invented everything. Ha ha. You know, she was making a little joke. And then she said, of course, we know what they really are like. And she drew this little picture of, it looked like not a saucer, but like a cup in reverse or upside down on a saucer, and almost like a bell shape, you know. And of course, the Nazis had that
Nazi bell.
The Nazi bell. And she said, we know that the propulsion system is all in the wings, and the wings were this flare, you know, around the center of this thing. And she drew a little diagram, you know. It's like now. So now, yeah, we know what they are. Why she is telling this to my grandmother, you know, who really almost never talked to anybody outside the huge German family, you know, that she had in northern Wisconsin. My grandmother in northern Wisconsin is being given this information. Why? Well, it's because she wanted my grandmother to sponsor her to come to the U.S. And eventually that did happen. I actually met this woman. She was a very cultured, knowledgeable, intelligent woman who obviously had done something more than just clerking or something like that. Louisa was her first name, and she had a last name that was the same as one that shows up in the annals of the rulers of that country just before, well, I'm going to say Nazis, which is scary. So this woman, you know, has manipulated my grandmother, who was very kind. I'm sure she was glad to do it and help her, and be a good friend to her. But it just goes to show how things can be connected, and how do I don't know for sure that is the exact drawing of one, but other drawings of it have come out, and then even news footage and that sort of thing. So how do you judge? You know, it's just kind of amazing. I felt like I had gotten this information, so I should put it out there in the book, see if somebody else has.
Absolutely, yes.
But isn't that, it's kind of astounding.
It is very astounding. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done with that. You would have to write a book just to put it in there.
Well, yeah.
I'm so glad you included it.
Well, I could also write one about my other grandmother.
Oh, but you're going to have to wait on that one.
But I will have to wait. It turned out she also got a box of photos from her when my mom passed on. I just had 5 boxes of family photos dumped on my house.
Oh, wow.
Really not even hardly a year ago. And so all this was kind of a shock. And we knew she went to Washington, D.C. to work for the government when World War II broke out, even though she was a one-room schoolhouse teacher in northern Wisconsin.
I'm going to have to interrupt you.
Oh, sure.
Because we have to go to break.
Oh,
okay. But I can't wait to hear this. We will be right back, everyone. I know you want to hear it, too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming. To the skeptic, there will never be enough. Hello, everyone. Join Kevin and Jennifer Malik, the host of Paraversal Universe, every Friday here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET-FM and The Rift. Log on or tune in as they check out the mysteries found within the 8 categories of the unknown and unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, cryptids and monsters, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, metaphysics, and forbidden archaeology. Listen as Kevin and Jennifer interview the top minds in their respective fields as they share theories and information regarding these unsolved mysteries. For future show and archive information, one can find Paraversal Universe on Facebook, Twitter, and MeWe. under various Paraversal Universe headings. So, for excellent talk radio about the unknown and unexplained, check out Paraversal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, LTD, and produced by WBHM-DB.com.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am so glad you're here. I'm so glad I'm here so I can hear this too. Linda, you are going to share with us an experience that your other grandmother had during World War II.
Right. And like I said, we thought she had said that she was hired by the Treasury to and the Secret Service to check receipts from expense reports that the agents gave, and that's what she was doing. Well, it turned out she was doing an awful lot more than that. We found out when I opened the box and found this photograph. It was with the OSS, which was the wartime kind of version of the pre-CIA, and it turned out that she was a full-fledged agent. And according to what I know about what these people did, she would have had to have been, flown to England to get special clothing, probably dropped behind enemy lines. She was recruited because she spoke flawless Czech and flawless English without an accent to either. So she could easily act like a double agent. Yeah. And so this is what she did. The picture was taken right after VE Day in 1945. And the thing was that anybody who wanted to stay could stay, or you could leave, whichever you wanted. And if you stayed, then you were part of the Secret Service, or what turned into the CIA. And she stayed for 2 more years.
Interesting.
So, yeah, there's no way to know what she did or what she knew. I have no idea, absolutely none. She was very careful. She didn't even want us ever to look in the box that these photos were in. I remember seeing the box high up in her closet, when I was growing up and visiting her. And we never were allowed to look at it. And nothing was written down. Nothing was ever told to anybody. So, I wish I knew. I only wish that I knew. But and then she moved when she got out of the service. She moved to Hillsboro, Wisconsin, which was where my other grandmother already lived, the one who got the diagram from the woman in Germany, and is also now known as the Mecca for mountain lions returning to Wisconsin, and especially over half of them, which are at least 150 reports. I've got a big appendix in the book. I know what I saw. Are black. And people describe them as black panthers, and they are not supposed to be able to exist. And yet they do, and really, really great witnesses. And people can go look up Return to Wildcat Mountain on YouTube or on Facebook and see a 2.5-minute trailer just to get an idea of the credibility of these witnesses that we have. We even have a woman who lives in Hillsboro, Wisconsin now, who was part of the Florida Panther Project, where the mountain lions that were in Florida were just kind of dying out as a species, and they brought in some very much healthier ones from Texas and other places and let them interbreed and kind of recovered the population there. So she has several PhDs and was an assistant in administrating this program, and she has seen the black variety outside her home in Hillsboro, Wisconsin. So it's pretty interesting. And then both my grandmothers lived right there. So how do you explain that? I don't know. Somehow I think it means I was meant to tell about it. That's all I can come up with.
That's what it sounds like, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, I mean, when I lived in rural Georgia, we had a black cat on the property, and I had never been around a wildcat before. It was just really bizarre, and I was told there's no way it could be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, you tell it.
Right.
Because I've seen it. I hear it scream in the night. I've heard
Right.
it scream in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I do not take that lightly. And I do know it's here. And oh my gosh, people told me that I had no idea what I had seen and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatevs.
Right.
I have an education. I'm not an idiot.
Exactly.
And that's not a house cat.
Right. You can the tail. The tail is usually the big giveaway because the tail is at least as long as the body.
Yes.
And they
and
walk.
It's fat. And it's not fat with fur. It's just fat.
Exactly. One of the witnesses in my film, Return to Wildcat Mountain, says it was a big tail. It was a round tail. You know, he keeps repeating to try and describe how this tail was. And they usually walk with it held straight out behind them and kind of
if
a
they're
funny
stalking.
hook at the end.
Yes. If they're stalking, it definitely is straight.
Yeah. And
they're pretty much always looking for food. So
Exactly. So, and I think Georgia is probably a prime state for, maybe that same population that was in Florida. I'm not sure, but there weren't supposed to be any in Wisconsin at all, since the last one was supposed to have been wiped out around 1930 or a little even before that.
Wow,
so
that's quite some time. So
exactly, but they just are there, and so far nobody's been hurt or anything like that in Hillsborough. But people are seeing them to the degree where it's almost like everybody has seen it. At the last one, there was one as recently as last March in Hillsborough, where one of the town barbers was sitting on his back porch, and he happens to live in the very extreme outskirts of this little town. And he was on his back porch, and he saw something move, he turned, and here was this huge black cat with the tail, long as the body, walking through his backyard, not that far from him, not looking at him, just walking like, well, this is my path, this is where I go. And then he found out that his next door neighbor had also seen it a couple of times. Wow. So he was not the only one, but there are even stronger ones than that. But I found accounts of this going way, way back. Even everybody's familiar with Laura Ingalls Wilder, Half Pint from the TV show with Michael Landon, and she wrote the books Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, and they were true accounts of what her family went through when they were homesteading way back in the day. And one of the stories tells about her grandfather he needed something in town, and he took the horse and just decided to run it through the woods and into town and get back with it that night. And he did. Well, on his way back, he heard this growl, and there was quite a large black, they call it a panther in the book, in Laura Ingalls Wilder's book. There's a large black panther jumped on the rear end of his horse, and he slid off the front way because this thing was trying to claw at the horse, whatever it could get at. Ended up somehow getting back on the horse, riding to home. He managed to get it home, but he could hear this thing jumping from tree to tree in the treetops right out, directly above him as he went. So it was terrifying. But this was way back, in the late 1800s.
Yes.
And one of our best known history writers, and it just shows that this was considered a real thing and a common thing and wasn't even questioned in those days.
That is just absolutely cool as all get out.
It is. These little things, they seem like such minor things, but then you put them all together and wow.
It makes a good background. This isn't something that's just random.
No, and Native Americans, we have on the film a Native American who tells about their view of it, and he said in his tribal background, they believe that the tan cats are just natural animals. They're just as they are, but the black ones can go back to the spirit world. They're half spirit animal, and they travel between into their other dimension and ours when they need to. And he talks about the time when all the animals are supposed to be coming back to their homelands. And they were once all over the U.S. and Canada and North America. So maybe it is that time where they're coming home.
Fascinating. Yeah, we have someone in chat who said, yep, the mountain lion has been in her area too. She lives in northern Wisconsin.
Okay.
And she said with all the hiking that she's done, she hasn't had a sighting, and she really feels like she would rather run into a dog man.
I would too. I am with her. Dog man.
And she also says
or
that she's been told that by a native.
that they're coming back as spirit creatures, or
Well, she's listening, so we'll see what she types in.
yeah.
But,
And I have several witnesses in the movie who also heard that. And, you know, not only just from the mouth of the man himself, but some witnesses have heard that as well from older relatives of theirs who've lived in that area. So,
I just find that fascinating because that would be a logical thing if that were the case.
Exactly.
And, of course, people that don't want to believe in anything are going to find the logic in something unusual. But that doesn't make... Oh, she said yes, that they are spirit creatures.
Oh, okay,
So,
right. Yeah, I do think it's very widespread, and you can understand it. I mean, even scientists jokingly call them ghost cats because they're so reclusive, and it's very difficult to find one to look at unless they don't care for some reason, unless they're looking at you maybe.
yes.
But yeah, they are around. My husband was stalked by one several years ago. We moved to a different house 3 years ago, but before that, for 20-some years, we lived right on the edge of the Kettle Moraine State Forest, which is holds quite a bit of different wildlife. And I've had numbers of Bigfoot reports from there. I personally have seen large cougar prints in the snow when going through on my investigational rounds. So we knew it was there, but we had an acre behind our house that dropped straight down into several of these kettles. They were like large hunks of earth scooped out when the last glacier stopped right there. And so nobody ever goes down in those kettles. There's just brambles and stuff like that. You wouldn't want to be down. Well, my husband had walked all the way to the back of the yard in the dark. He didn't even bother to pick up a flashlight. He wanted something out of the shed or his boat that were back there. And all of a sudden he heard what you described, that scream in the night. And he knew what it was. You could not mistake it. And he said he just froze. And a few seconds later, there was this growling sound and a whoomp, and it had landed like 3 feet in front of him.
Oh, my word.
Face to face. And luckily, he's enough of a sportsman that he pretty much knew what to do, which was to kick, yell, hold up his arms, wave his arms, scream.
Go big.
Yeah, try and appear big and walk backwards. Never take your eyes off of them or lose eye contact. And he had to do that the length of our whole yard until he got to our deck, which sits out about 10 feet from the house. When he got to the deck and there were some lights, and probably different sounds, ironically, I was right inside my office, right next to where this was going on. I never heard it because I was sitting there with a headset on doing a radio show just like this. But when it got there, then he said it turned away and just went down into the kettle immediately. And he came into the house, and I came out of my office, and his face was just drained. I mean, it was just like white. I've never seen him look like that before. And because it was just such a close shave, it probably would have dragged him down into the kettle, because that's what they do. And I wouldn't have known where he was or where he went. It would have been hard.
Good heavens.
Yeah, it was very, very, very frightening event. But we were living directly on the path that a lot of these animals are taking now from the Black Hills through Minnesota, and then they follow Lake Michigan down. And one of them ended up in Chicago some years ago and was shot. Another one made it all the way to Connecticut after 3 years. And these are ones that have been identified by DNA in their scat that they leave behind, or hair samples, and then they're followed and tracked. They're collared and followed. And this other one ended up in Connecticut in 3 years and was run over, unfortunately, by some traffic. So even the scientists know that there are animals on the move, and that, yeah, they get hungry and they might stalk people or whatever, for all we know. Usually people say that a lot of dogs will go missing. There's a spate of sightings that are going on right now in Janesville, Wisconsin. And
that's where our listener is.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, there have been some recently. If you go to lindagodfrey.com, you can read about one of the main ones. 2 guys who were working on the south end of Janesville, just where you exit the city, had adjoining shifts. One was coming in, one was going out. They were at the back door of this building next to sort of a meadow, and they both saw this full-size black They called it a panther, so I'm going to too, just to be consistent. And just watched it. It was about maybe 20 feet from them and walked into the meadow. And they looked at each other, and they were at first, they weren't afraid. They were like so excited because they knew what it was they saw. They kind of started wading into the meadow, and then they realized it was perfectly still. There's no way to tell where it was. And they both kind of, whoops, that was not a good move.
That would not be a good idea.
No, move backwards away from it. But there's another, my next door neighbor's father-in-law saw what he thought was the back end of a black panther type of creature. It was on a trail by Palmer Park in the city, a very well-used park, which was due north of the other sighting at that distribution place where the guys worked. Right. And I've had another one too, and there was a well-known tan one. So they're moving that far. Janesville is in very southern Wisconsin, almost to the state line with Illinois. And it has I think one reason it probably likes this area is the city has a green belt of saved conservation land that travels all the way around it and that hooks up with the Rock River. And they're very much into rivers, these kinds of big cats, rivers and freshwater lakes. So it's
I'm
very...
have to interrupt you.
Sure.
Okay. And meanwhile, Kim is going, I need to stop hiking alone. She's not going to. But we will be right back. This is our top of the hour news break. And you know what? You never know. Maybe we'll find a little good news. I mean, one can always be hopeful. And if we don't find it, we'll just have to manifest it ourselves. We'll be back. Y'all come back too.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from the University of Alabama. Through Bama by Distance, you can earn a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree with online coursework and affordable tuition. Learn more or apply today at bamabydistance.ua.edu.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg says he's sorry for embracing the controversial police practice known as stop and frisk during his time as mayor. From member station WNYC, Jessica Gould reports the apology comes as Bloomberg appears to be getting ready to enter the Democratic race for president.
At a black church in Brooklyn, Bloomberg said thinking about his future made him think about his past. And as mayor, he says he didn't fully understand the impact stop and frisk had on the predominantly black and Latinx men who were searched and on their communities. He said he's sorry.
I got something important wrong. I got something important really wrong.
Some leaders, including Reverend Al Sharpton, said they appreciated the apology, but it will take more to make up for the damage done to communities of color. Others, including the current mayor and police union, said it was too little, too late. For NPR News, I'm Jessica Gould in New York City.
The second week of public hearings in the impeachment inquiry into President Trump's dealings with Ukraine gets underway this week, with 8 people who've already testified behind closed doors scheduled to appear again, including Ambassador Gordon Sondland, who is also a major Trump supporter. After he testified behind closed doors, he then amended his testimony. NPR's Mara Eliason has more.
There's a question about whether Gordon Sondland has gotten himself into some trouble. How is he going to square his testimony from what we've heard from others? And also, we don't know if he's going to be a good witness for the president, a good witness for the Democrats, or just unreliable. Remember, Donald Trump said in October that Gordon Sondland was highly respected. He said he was a really good man and great American. And then in November, the president said, let me just tell you, I hardly know the gentleman. So the question for Wednesday is who throws who under the bus?
NPR's Mara Eliason. In Hong Kong, tensions between pro-democracy protesters and police are getting worse. Demonstrators inside the Polytechnic University set its main entrance ablaze as police made another attempt to take the building. It's been a tense standoff through the night as police used tear gas and water cannon against the activists, and police say they may fire ammunition if they continue to attack officers. The BBC's Gabriel Gatehouse has more from the scene.
We saw several dozen black-clad police officers suddenly materialize out of nowhere and start storming the place. They were firing rubber bullets and tear gas, and in response, the protesters unleashed all the petrol bombs they had, sometimes hurling whole boxes at a time, which has caused 2 huge fires at the main entrances to the campus. You might be able to hear the fire alarm going off there. Everyone is milling around. There's quite a bit of panic. I've seen some injured people.
The BBC's Gabriel Gatehouse reporting from Hong Kong. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. In New York, Syracuse University has suspended all fraternity social activities for the rest of the semester after an African-American student reported being called a racial slur this weekend, and this is pending an investigation. The student told officials the slurs came from a group of students that included members of one fraternity. The school's chancellor says they already have security video and eyewitness accounts. The school is already investigating racist graffiti in a residence hall bathroom found earlier this month. The worst drought to hit Zimbabwe in decades is having a devastating effect on its wildlife. Ishma Fondikwa reports from hard-hit National Park that more than 200 elephants from across the country have died from lack of food and water.
The situation is so bad this year, there just isn't enough food and water to go around. Even when Wanga National Park gets normal rainfall, most natural water sources dry up during the hot summer months, and the animals share the 60 or so wells with solar-powered pumps dotted across the park. This year, the problem is so widespread that in the opposite part of the country, Zimbabwe National Parks is planning to relocate 600 elephants and other animals from the Save Valley Conservancy to less congested parks. For NPR News, I'm Ishma Fundikwa in Wanga National Park, Zimbabwe.
Asian markets are trading higher at this hour. The Asia Dow is up a fraction of 1%. The Nikkei also trading higher. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to the second hour of Fate Mag Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and you are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. My guest tonight is Linda Godfrey. She is one of the most fascinating women. We have had an opportunity to discuss all types of things. I'm loving this because it's such a diverse range of topics, Linda, that you are knowledgeable about, and I'm so glad you're sharing.
Well, I don't know what good it would be if I did not share them all. And, you know, I worked as a reporter for 10 years after I first broke that news of the Bray Road Beast. And during those 10 years, I was writing on every sort of topic for the newspaper. Hardly any of it was cryptid related. In fact, I think I did maybe a total of 3 updates of just, you know, sightings people had seen during those 10 years. And then finally decided it was time to write a book and write everything I knew and had at the time down so that people could have the information. And it just seemed like an exercise in sharing more than anything, because I was knowledgeable enough to know that in the publishing world, very seldom do you write a niche type of book where it's just probably only interesting to a small segment of the population and make anything for it. I never expected that. I just wanted people to know and have the correct story and see what had really happened then, and then it just sort of went into a landslide from that. Each book begat another book and more interest, and it just went along. But sharing what happened has always been my main goal. You know, it's just, if nobody talks, nobody knows the thing, nobody else will know and benefit from what you know about that wild, crazy world out there that we live in.
Well, exactly. You know, when you have information that can literally save people, why would you not share? You're right. We have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
And do you mind if we go ahead and clear these out so that when the next ones come in, we'll be good to go?
Oh, not at all. Go right ahead.
Sherry wants to know, have you ever personally seen these cryptids while you were researching?
I have seen what I cannot conceive of as anything else but Bigfoot, and I think it was the same one, and it was 3 times within about the space of a year, and each time it was daylight. I was not terribly far away and close enough that I could have been able to identify any animal. And I did not have a camera. It was just like a chance thing. It was not very, maybe within a half mile or mile of my home that I was living in at the time. And I just was out for a little walk, or a stroll, and there it would be. And I wasn't having eye problems or any other thing. And like I said, it was 3 different times of the year even, so the background sort of changed. One field was adjacent to another, so it was a little different that way too. And the creature always looked the same way each time. I may have seen part of a dog man in Michigan, like around 2005 or 2006, when I was on a trip for the History Channel, and we saw something that was gray fur with a vertical spine, highlighted by the floodlight that was on the road, but managing to evade most of the rest of it just in shadow. But we knew that it was 7 feet tall because it momentarily blocked out a road sign that was on the other side of the road as it ran across. But what I saw was the spine of something with gray fur. And that was exactly what the witnesses had reported was out there in this lonely, lonely road in Michigan. So I may have seen part of the dog man. I don't say I did for sure because I didn't see the whole animal. Just that glimpse. It seems likely. I don't know what else it could have been. But with the Bigfoot, there was just no doubt, absolutely no doubt in my mind. Also, it was not a spot where they had never been. I'd had lots of reportings, as I said before, from that Kettle Moraine State Forest area. So it was in keeping with what other people were saying, too.
Okay. Well, she follows that up with, why do you think these creatures come around certain people? Are they trying to send some kind of message? Are they coming from another dimension? What's their draw?
Well, it could be, really all of the above for all we know. Yes. I don't think anybody knows for positively sure because I keep saying we just don't have one sitting down with us ready to tell it all, or, where we can get our hands on it, or maybe let us take some blood tests and a little nice movie of it. We don't have that. So we have to just sort of conjecture. But I think they're a real phenomenon. I think they very likely could be what not just Native Americans, but scientists and investigators like John Keel does a really good job of it, describing how, we really inhabit a very small amount of the range of the electromagnetic, there's a word for that, electromagnetic range. I'll just say that. You know what I mean?
I do, like the spectrum.
Yeah, the spectrum of the electromagnetic waves. And I won't go through the gamma waves and all that, but you can see that the different kinds of them intersect and are much larger, and you realize there could be things or intelligences in all of these other ones that can partially penetrate ours, and we see them sometimes. Now, I also want to say, or to answer the question about why do certain people see them, I didn't see them for a good 20 years after I started investigating. That's how long it took. And I'd actually really given up, for some reason they don't want to show themselves to me or whatever, but I did start seeing them. And the thing is, I was still walking in the same paths. There was one thing different, though, that I have to say, and people may find this interesting or not, but right at the time before I saw them, just a few years before, I had a pretty good battle royale with breast cancer, and had real strong radiation, lost all the hair. I had really strong chemo, I should say, lost my hair, radiation, more chemo, whatever there was, I was battling it. And so I was walking on those paths. I made that kind of my medicine every day when I could get out there to walk. And I was meditating and, putting prayers in the meditation and making it part of my walk and, just letting me be. It was my way of adding some natural healing to it. And so I'm singing these songs, and this is an area where a lot of the people only came on weekends, and so very often during the week there's almost no one around. So I could feel free to walk on these paths or small roads and be singing. Now, you imagine, I knew that these creatures, the Bigfoot, had been reported in this area ever since at least when the reports for the Beast of Bray Road in the 91, 92 started, and some went back earlier than that. So I knew Bigfoot were around there. But imagine you're in a place like that. You're trying to avoid being seen by people. You're trying to suss out who lives there so you can avoid them better and know what to do. And here's this woman. All of a sudden, I probably was perceived as very different when I was undergoing all that treatment too. And on top of that all, I'm walking along singing. Who walks the roads singing? I must have presented myself as something very different and unusual and maybe harmless. Who knows what they would think from something like that. So my own personal theory is that maybe that made me seem more of a part of the scene, of the actual scene. Maybe it made me seem too weird. Maybe their scientists were studying me. I don't know. But somehow I feel that may have attracted them to be aware of my presence a little bit more.
Could be. And one thing that would be true also would be that due to the chemotherapy and due to radiation, you smelled different than anyone they'd ever come across.
Exactly.
So you were a novelty from every angle for them.
Right, I was. I mean, because with chemo, your body's literally filled with poison.
Absolutely.
They're working out through your pores, and you're just different in so many ways. And not everybody has that kind of an experience or a pre-experience to attract people. They'll say to me, I can't figure out why I'm the one that saw it, and it bothers me. I think about it. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it.
I hear that too. And don't you feel for these people?
I do.
They just, because they're so confused. This is something they've been told could never happen. It's not real. There's no way you could experience this.
Right.
And boom shakalaka. There it is.
It almost feels like they've got, the PTSD sort of experience because they relive it and relive it. It's not like a battlefield or anything like that. We're, not trying to go to that ground, but on its own level of.
But it's life altering.
Yeah, it's very life altering. When I saw those things, and I had another encounter with what I think was probably a bigger one, that if you go to lindagodfrey.com and type in the search box Bigfoot branch, you can see the whole story of that with pictures and everything. That was preceding my sightings of the full-bodied ones. But I won't go into that whole thing right now, but because you can see it better there.
Yes.
And again, it's just lindagodfrey.com, no W's. But it's very interesting. The witnesses are always grateful that I listen to them, and so many of them just say, I only wanted to tell somebody who wouldn't tell me I was crazy. And if that's the only service I end up providing, that was worth it to me, because it gives them some peace. It gives them a real kind of a sense of relief to know they're not the only one, and that there are other people. And now, back in 91, 92, we did not have the internet as we know it, where everyone was online and there was no Facebook. And so it's still very hard to connect with people. Now there are all kinds of Facebook groups that look at one facet or another, different facets of the either all cryptids or just dogmen or just Bigfoot, whatever it is. They can go find what suits them and feel part of a community. And I think that's great. I'm glad these things are happening. I certainly couldn't handle all these witnesses by myself, that's for sure.
Well, you'd never come out of your study.
No, exactly. It's too close.
You really wouldn't.
No, it's too close to that being true now as it is. So
yes. Well, do you believe in aliens as well? Have you ever seen anything that would indicate to you they may exist?
Well, when you say aliens, it's sort of an open book. Are we meaning living creatures that came from other planets like ours? Are we meaning people that have come from other dimensions to us? Are we meaning people that have always lived here, say, in the earth or as part of a larger, there's another word for it, a larger form of sentience that covers the whole earth and that interacts with our brains and then helps us create their looks. There are all sorts of theories as to what these things could be. Yeah.
Well, let's take them one at a time. after this break.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming. To the skeptic, there will never be enough. Hello everyone. Join Kevin and Jennifer Malik, the host of Paraversal Universe, every Friday here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET-FM and The Rift. Log on or tune in as they check out the mysteries found within the 8 categories of the unknown and unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, cryptids and monsters, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, metaphysics, and forbidden archaeology. Listen as Kevin and Jennifer interview the top minds in their respective fields as they share theories and information regarding these unsolved mysteries. For future show and archive information, one can find Paraversal Universe on Facebook, Twitter, and MeWe under various Paraversal Universe headings. So, for excellent talk radio about the unknown and unexplained, check out Paraversal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, Ltd., and produced by WBHM-DB.com.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Well, the first one I will take is that they are something that is part of, I don't know how long it's been here, but some sort of a field that covers our world, that is malleable, that can form itself according to what shape it wants to be, that can maybe even act through our brains and, use them as quantum computers or that sort of thing. I did have an experience where, and I put this in one of my books. I think it was the Real Werewolves book. I'm not positive, but it was back in, I think it would have been the 90s, early 90s, and I had been to have some little bit of minor surgery done the day before, and I had some medicine that pretty much I was awake, but I was not. Many people experience that. Yeah, and so I had some treatment. Well, the next day I was waking up in bed, and my husband was always on my right side. He was there, and I opened my eyes, and I wasn't in a dream world or anything like that. I was in my bedroom. Everything was where it should be. It wasn't gray and white. Everything had some color to it. And I looked to my left. I turned my head just a little bit was all it took, and looked to my left, and there were these. They looked exactly like the Greys. There were at least 3 of them. There may have been 4. I'm not sure. But they were all standing on that side of the bed, just looking at me. And they had the slanty, huge, sunglass-like eyes, and some sort of uniform on. I think it's been a while. My memory is not quite as sharp, but they looked, and I could see that they realized I was awake, and I was trying to get my husband to wake up, but And I was half screaming. I was getting sound out. I wasn't like I was totally not able to move or anything, but I was terrified. And as soon as they saw that, they kind of arranged themselves single file and walked out through the wall next to my bed. They just walked out.
Good heavens.
And, yeah, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, I'm glad they're out of there. And then my next thought was, that's my son's bedroom on the other side of that wall.
Oh, no.
And my husband slept through the whole thing. He never did wake up. But so I was able to move and get up, and I just ran and looked in his bedroom. There was nothing there. He was sound asleep. So we were all there. But I had a feeling that I was paid a visit to check on the results of the surgery that I had, which makes no sense. You know, I don't have any other real, reason to think that, but that's what it was like. So I can't say I don't believe in them or I've never had an experience with them. But the interesting thing is that last year my husband, we're in a different house and everything, had some surgery done to him. And he was taking a shower, and he had some really strong medicine the day before too, you know, for pain, just when they go in and do this minor surgery. Mm-hmm. And he said he saw motion while he was standing in the shower, and he said there was, and now my husband is an outdoorsman, he's an engineer, he go by the numbers guy. He said there was a fairy. And I said, a what? He said, I saw a fairy. Fairies are real.
Holy wow.
It was like somebody had knocked him upside the head with a baseball bat, in my view, you know, because he doesn't say things like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? What did it look like? He said, well, it was, you know, he said it was real small, you know, like a few inches tall, maybe a little more. And it reminded him sort of like the Disney ones, except he said the wings were more like dragonfly wings. And he saw, it came twice. It showed it to him once and kind of flittered around. Oh, and he also felt like applauding, like just kind of clapping his hands. He was so delighted to see this thing, which again doesn't sound like my husband to anybody who knows it. And it came again, and on one of those appearances, it had this sort of purple flower that it handed. He thought of it as a pitcher plant at first, but something with a little reservoir, and like they were handing it to him. And he said he applauded again. So similar, different forms, very different forms, but acting similar. They intrude, they engage a little bit, and then they leave. So I see a lot of similarity, and I think they're not caused by the medicine, but the medicine lets your filter go away, by which you might normally see such things. And I think we all develop a filter.
We have a nursing student in chat who also lives in northern Wisconsin, and she had just finished her OR rotation. She said that she can tell you many patients experience this within 24 to 72 hours post-anesthesia. She's heard quite similar stories.
Interesting.
So
what does she think as a professional?
I just said, fascinating. Do they actually believe it? This is 24 more hours post-op. And she said, bingo, yes.
Wow.
That moves the filters.
Yeah, I will tell them. And by filters, I mean, you know how babies will be sitting in their crib playing and talking with some invisible thing all the time. And the children have their invisible playmates.
Yes.
My husband had one of those. It was her name was Mrs. Hen. I never had one myself, but it's like when we get older, our brain learns to filter these things out so we can manage around in this world. You know, imagine if we saw these things all the time wherever we went. It would be very hard to focus and do what we need to do here on Earth. So I think of necessity, we do have these natural filters that focus us on the third dimension that we live and work and play in. And so sometimes that gets weakened, and maybe it is by these strong medicines. There are other things that can do it also, I'm sure. And then we see something from this other reality and don't know what to do.
Well, I know that last October I fell. I was given Versed, and I was pain medication for several months. And in the course of the time that I was going through that, there was all kinds of stuff happening in my house. I mean, truly happening. My daughter, I would be sound asleep. My daughter-in-law and my husband both were my primary caregivers, and they would hear me calling them. I was sound asleep.
Wow.
And then, they saw things around me, and it wasn't me seeing them. I wasn't the person seeing that. So it was really fascinating, and we just blew through that break, so I'm just going to pop it in here later. But I can do that. I am convinced that was a very odd experience because my husband is a machinist and mathematician, and
right, you know the type then.
I do totally know the type. He's an engineer without that degree.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when he came in there and he was like, there is something very odd in this house.
Yeah.
I just heard you call me, and you were totally out.
Yeah, when my husband says that, I know he means it, because he would be very, he'll think of every possible other thing it could be. And I think that's good. I try and do that too. You should try and think of other things that it could be, so that you aren't mistaking the real ones. But when it's real, you know it. It's just the sort of thing. And also, I tell in Monsters Among Us about the time two of my investigating friends and I were approached by one of those discs, those spheres. It's not a disc, but a sphere, when we were staking out something in the field of the owner of the field where we were doing some research. And I had thought it was an airplane light at first. We were looking for something entirely different I won't go into. But this light, and I said to the guys who were both sitting in the front seat, I was in the back, I said, guys, I don't think that is an airplane. And it had stopped and begun to move backwards. And as soon as, and I think this is important, the three of us focused our attention on it. We were giving it focused human attention. It began to move toward us across this 400-acre field. And it looked quite small, like the light of an airplane at first, but it got bigger as it came toward us. And it finally stopped, and we were just kind of, it didn't take real long. We were trying to figure out what to do and what it was, and should we move, and should we, get out of the car, because you couldn't tell. It just looked like this big sphere coming toward us. And it stopped maybe, we all estimated, we all saw exactly the same thing. We agreed very well. It was 25 feet about above the ground and about 25 feet away, so quite close. And it was somewhat translucent, but not really, you couldn't really see through it. It was an odd light that it gave out one beam, but it didn't give out general light. It was all kind of within itself. And by then, I was just had recovered my senses enough to put my camera up, or my cell camera up to take a picture, when Sanjay Singhal, he won't mind me using his name, he's in the book, had this feeling that he should take the mag light and just shine it on it. And he did that real quickly. And when he did it, we all had the extreme feeling that whatever this was very surprised, did not expect this from us, and didn't know what to do. And so it kind of fizzed out on itself. The light just went boom, went
really?
like one of those newer, the curly light bulbs that they have now that they don't just go on and off.
Just fade out, yeah.
Yeah, that's but not a long fade. And it was kind of moving a little bit. Jittering was the word we settled upon.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't know if Sanjay saved us from an abduction, because that kind of experience often precedes an abduction or other incidents. But
well, it does. I mean, that's when lost time shows up.
Exactly. And Sanjay felt, well, we were like, where did it go? Did it just go in on itself? Did it go somewhere? We were near some bushes, and so Sanjay felt he should get out and just look behind those bushes. He really wanted to. We didn't think it was a good idea, but he did it. And a few seconds later, he came almost staggering back, saying he was incredibly sick and had to leave right then, which is not normal for him. So we had this experience. Now, these types of spheres can come in different colors. There are often orange ones that are seen. There's something called purple blob, which isn't quite as perfect looking, but orange and other shades. There are blue ones. I've heard of people seeing green ones. This one was mostly white. If anything, it leaned toward the bluish, but I wouldn't have said it was blue. And there are different native peoples who believe that shamans turn themselves into these balls of just pure compressed energy in order to travel faster or to go other places that they need to go. Some believe that they can conform themselves to the looks of a Bigfoot. I've been reading that just in a couple of different places. You know, when I
that
said
would be shapeshifters or skinwalkers.
very, very close to it, something very near like that. Yeah, or something, again, just with the sentient field that is around the entire Earth, which I think is possibly true, that can work in concert to show what form it wants to show up as. So anyway, that's it. It's somewhat complicated, but there you have it. That was a real thing that we saw. Maybe it was energy that could disperse itself. We don't know for sure what it was made of, but it was a real thing. We all witnessed it. We all saw it do the same thing, and it was it makes you question yourself too. You know, just as much as an animal type of form.
I actually think maybe more than an animal type form, because an animal form is like, okay, I'm seeing something tangible.
Maybe I'm just seeing a house cat, right?
Right.
A 4-foot-long house cat, right.
4-foot-long house cat, a 6-foot-tall, 7-foot-tall dog that has really great legs and haunches. You know, I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
But at least it is something that presents as a being.
Right. And this just, you don't know. You have no clue exactly of what it is. I have seen the conjecture or the statement that the native shaman of different cultures, not just in the U.S., travel this way. And it's a big thing that is seen in Europe too. And there they see them converting into fairies. So, or fairy-like beings. So it's...
Werewolves converting to fairies?
No, the sphere-like things.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
I have heard of Bigfoot converting to elf-type beings. And I found
I've heard that.
Several older books. Right. And back, you know, so the shape of these spheres and the way that they behave, you know, and there's just no other... You can't explain it by it being a balloon, because a balloon wouldn't travel across the field to us and then hang there. It wasn't a star or a planet, because it came right up to us. Obviously, we'd be dead if a star or a planet approached us from 25 feet away. There's no way to put a simple name on it. There are these other things. Now, this land that we were staking out was one where very strange lights had been recorded. The owner had like well over 1,000 photographs from his trail cams of different things that happened. You know, and that's going into a whole new thing. But in some of them, you know, there were also these weird mists that would appear. There would be a dead deer carcass that the trail cameras were focused on. 1 minute they're showing the deer lying there. The next minute, for half an hour, picture after picture of some kind of weird translucent mist is there. And then at the last, the mist is gone, and so is the deer. The carcass is totally gone.
Holy wow.
Yeah, when we've got those photos, you know, I think I put a representative sample in the book, and I've heard of that happening other places. It's these misty things, whether they're things or just something that is brought forth and handled by other beings, I don't know. By whatever wanted that deer carcass was able to produce this mist to hide their actions, and then nobody knows. But that one, actually, there were additional clues. There were large dogman prints, which are kind of like very large, super overly large wolf prints. Mm-hmm. They had to climb a barbed wire fence. Whatever it was doing it had to have picked up that carcass, climbed over this barbed wire fence, and then the owner and a friend followed the tracks all the way out of that field. So it kind of gives you an idea of what that might have been.
Yes. Well, you know, I mentioned our chat room. One of our chat guests actually had a dogman encounter. As she was driving. Yes. And it was in northern Wisconsin near Lake Michigan. And it was a couple of times, actually. I mean,
wow.
it was just a very unusual thing, and it's as she was driving down the road, and it was running beside her and keeping up.
Mm-hmm.
And she just typed in that, oddly enough, it was foggy.
Oh, wow.
When she saw it.
Yep, that's another thing that very often happens. Was it when it was running and keeping up, was it on its hind legs or on all fours?
Let's see if she types that in.
Okay. Because there's another category of these weird canines that I finally just named and set aside that I call dire dogs, because they're huge, bigger than timber wolves, kind of like the dire wolves were, but they sometimes look more doggish. They might have doggish features, shorter snouts, whatever, and they follow cars. They run after cars, keep up with them, and sometimes try to bash them into the ditch.
Okay, well, this is what, yes. She said it was bounding like a dog and deer mixed. It wasn't running like a dog.
Okay. So it was bound, and I've heard that bounding thing too, but was it going was it running on its hind legs like a human, or?
No, I don't think so, but
it was sort of between them.
Yes,
yeah,
and she said that it was so fast that it just made no sense that something could be, because she was trying to get away.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And there's no way it could have kept up. And she drives a monster vehicle, so, yeah.
So, I would love it if she would like to write to me and tell me more
I'll
of a
give her your email.
Yeah, you can give her my email. That would be great. And then just more of a description of the appearance and the movement and what it did and that sort of thing. And how, if it did affect her vehicle at all, too. I like to know that as well. But it sounds like a dire dog. It really does. And everybody describes these things as just the size of a pony or of a bull calf or a miniature horse. They're much larger and sturdier than the regular, say regular in quotes, dogman type of creature.
Yes. She said it was 4 legs, but she was astounded that it went as fast as her, and then it zagged in front of the car, then lateral to her, and disappeared into the fog.
That is so much like the dire dogs. Yeah.
Well, I will put her in touch with you, and this is someone who I can completely vouch for.
Okay, that's great.
So,
yeah, I'm very familiar with northern Wisconsin. My dad was from Price County, and I actually owned the family farm at one time. So I spent many a summer week and weekend going all over northern Wisconsin.
Well, I'll tell you where it is when we're off the air, and you may have had similar reports there.
Oh, very interesting. Well, I really am excited to hear about this.
And we have someone else who is new to you, has just learned about you through the show, and she was like, werewolves? I want to hear about werewolves. And I was just like, well, we can do that. She saw the werewolf title, and she is just like, I'd love to hear about that. But we have 3 minutes before we start our break.
Sure. Well, I'll just mention real quickly that werewolf is the name loved by publishers. I like to call them unknown upright canines. And I don't think they're traditional werewolves, but it makes a much better title for the publisher.
And publishers are all about that because
they
sell.
Right. They need to sell the books or they can't print any more books. So
that's right.
Can't blame them.
Well, and you like your books to sell too. So it's a good thing. It's a good blend.
It is. It's a win-win, I guess. But I always do explain. I always do explain what I mean by it. So
well, and I appreciate that because it helps me. So, I have been so fascinated. I've been reading everything I can get my hands on relevant to this topic because I'm fascinated by dogmen.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend, Butch Wachowski, who is out of Pennsylvania, who had a report of dogmen at a residential area, and he and men with him went out to get information on it. Find it, remove it, whatever. Well, you don't just remove a dogman.
No.
So they were sitting there. They weren't sitting there. They were standing outside their vehicles. They were all armed. And it came strolling by them. And every one of them knew if they pulled a weapon, they were going to die.
Mm-hmm.
They did not do anything because of the telepathic communication.
Yep. It just sounds so right in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, every one of them knew. So I thought that was an interesting
Really
thing
interesting.
too.
Well, I have a theory that they can smell guns.
Yes.
Think how different a gun must smell from an ordinary object. You've got your gun oil that they used to clean them and that sort of thing. There's metal in there. There's different metals, different materials. They must have a sound. They probably have a sound that we can't perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they are probably not terribly scared. They're more likely. I've had a couple walking along where the husband had a gun and the wife had a camera, and they saw, this was in Canada, they saw the dog man standing upright, leaning against a tree, sort of watching them. And the husband raised his gun, and it didn't do anything. And then the wife raised her camera, and it just shot right off through the trees. It was gone.
Interesting.
Yeah, but Butch's story is really riveting, too. I mean, you think that you've got guns and you're really well protected from these things, but I somehow believe that you're probably not as protected as you are. It's really like what happened with the Bigfoot. People started telling about trying to shoot the Bigfoot, and they couldn't because either it would just sort of bounce and drop, or it would appear to go through them, but there'd be no blood trail, and they would just get away. Occasionally they would just sort of disappear into a bush or something like that. And then the same thing, when I started getting the Dogman reports, I started hearing the same story from people who attempted, for one reason or another, to shoot a Dogman, and they had the same exact outcome. So that again tells me that perhaps, I really like John Keel's idea of the spectrum.
Yes.
Of the energies, because it just explains what people report so well, and all kinds of people. Native American people report the same thing. People on little-known country roads in the South. Now I've been getting more and more from Southern California and the desert area that way, and they're just so consistent that there's something.
Yes.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. The experiencer that I mentioned would like to know if it's common that before they're seen, and you would know this because you speak with so many, experiencers. If before they're seen, that you experience a feeling of the flight or fight parasympathetic response being activated, because the times that she has seen it, it would happen. She would have that reaction before she even knew it was there.
That's a very interesting question. Sometimes people will say that they felt they were being watched. That's probably what I hear, and that makes them kind of naturally maybe go into that mode. If you feel you're being watched, you're in the woods and you don't know what it is, you're going to have.
She's in a vehicle.
Well, even in the vehicle, people are just as frightened from the vehicle as they are if they're standing out. Because it'll be kind of trying to persuade them that it could get them in the vehicle, is how it usually goes, which is again something that's not a normal dog thing. So we know there's something a little bit odd there. But there's another thing. Researcher Jenny Randles came up with the term the Oz factor, and this is something that so often happens when people are out and about where they can encounter this creature or it's near them. They'll notice maybe the fog coming in, like misty, the thing that we talked about before. So oftentimes the air will change colors. It'll have a yellow glow or a light green glow. Everything seems to be shimmering, and there's no sound. The birds stop singing, the crickets stop chirping. It's just deadly quiet until the encounter is over, and then everything comes back like it was.
It's like the forest is hiding.
Yeah, exactly. And she calls that the Oz factor because it's kind of like in the Wizard of Oz. Everything is just different all of a sudden. So, and I think it's a great name. I think it works really well. And many people do report something like this.
Okay. Another question is, has any person ever reported being attacked and damaged by these?
That's a great question because, for me, and I know there are lots of other reports that have gone to other investigators too, but for myself personally, over 27 years, the worst that I've heard was a man who was hiking a Canadian trail in Quebec. It was like his day off. He didn't have a gun or anything like that, just a recreational hiker. And he came face to face with at least a 6-foot creature covered with fur all over. It was, the obvious dogman thing on his hind legs. And he said he felt like it was kind of as surprised as he was. And he tried to sort of evade it. It made a move. He went to evade it. And he said under reflection later, he thought probably it was just trying to get by him, because he said if it had wanted to get me and, lunge at me, it could easily. What it did was it tried to get past him. It kind of leaped. It had its teeth bared, and it grazed his midsection on the side of it with the fangs and a sharpened tooth, and made kind of a big cut. He had to go and get it stitched up. And He said he was too ashamed to tell the hospital people what he saw. He just told them it was a bear. And they kind of looked at each other and they said, well, it is consistent with some sort of curved, pointed instrument. And that was the closest he got. But he had a picture of the scar. And I had that posted for a long time on my old site. I'm not sure where it is now. I should try and find that and pull it up again. But it is kind of a fearsome looking scar, but he said it was no bear. He knew that. There was nothing else that could have been other than what he had heard described. I also had a group of young people who were walking in Milwaukee toward the lakefront through this neighborhood where there were cornfields in between the neighborhood and the cliffs that dropped down to Lake Michigan. And they heard that the place was sort of a lover's lane type of thing where there were spooks if you went and sat down or whatever. So they were just walking through to see if they could see the ghost. And suddenly they noticed something kind of rustling and lurking in the cornfield to their left. And they turned, and it was a wolf-like thing on its hind legs. And they immediately turned around and started running back for the lighted areas. And it followed them running until, the one that was the slowest, you know how that old joke goes?
I only have to outrun you.
the slowest one, yeah. Well, the slowest guy at the end could hear the creature gaining on him rather easily. He was sure it was going to get him. And he was wearing a lightweight cotton shirt that was longer than usual, and buttoned down. And he had like a t-shirt or something under it. The shirt wasn't completely buttoned, so the shirt was kind of flowing out behind him. And he felt something rip, and then he turned around, and the creature was gone, but he had these marks, looked like razors, tore up his shirt. Not tore it up really, but made the slits in it like you would expect.
Yes.
And that frightened him a lot. He and his friends proceeded as fast as they could. They were like in their early 20s to their nearby aunt's house, and they were just completely overcome with fright. And she called their mother. I would imagine. She called their mother. She called me. I was there within a couple of days, even though I was undergoing chemo at the time. I had my husband drive me there because I wasn't going to miss this. And I found almost perfect, what you would think of as dogman tracks in kind of a clay-like puddle that was, you had to go inside the cornfield. I don't know why we thought of it, but we went in. There was kind of a little path that led in the cornfield, and we followed that and found this huge clay puzzle. And you could see there were the tracks of a deer, perfect deer tracks, and you could see where the back of the deer legs dug into that puddle so it could spring out. And the same with the dogman one. It was a very large, what looked like a very, very big wolf print with a heel print where it kind of went back on its hocks so it could spring after it and make like a big bound for it. Mm-hmm. And we followed it. It looked like the deer got away somehow. There wasn't
that's a plus.
Yeah, which makes you glad for the deer. But, hey, upright wolves have to eat too, I guess. But that was the second one where somebody seemed to be hurt. He wasn't touched at all on his body, just his shirt. So those would be the only two.
Well, not for lack of trying, though, right?
No, not for lack. But it seems like they're trying to do is not get the person, but scare the person.
To keep them out of their area,
to keep them out of their territory, or maybe they are of some other substance in the electromagnetic field or whatever you want to call it, that needs human emotion, needs a strong emotion pulsed from our quantum computer, as the scientists call them, brains. Maybe our emotions are food to them. It's born out.
I have heard that about certain species of off-world races, off-world species.
I know what you mean. Yep, I know exactly what you mean. And some people have said, well, maybe it's the same thing with these things. Maybe that is where they're from, also just in a different form. So that's kind of what there is about that. I know that there have been other reports of a couple of incidents. One was where a family was killed camping, and there's another one too. And I don't say yes or no to those because I had no chance to investigate them personally. Right. And they're very complex and required a lot of, more than I would be able to. So it may have been, it may have not. I don't have any information one way or the other. But just from things that were personally reported to me, those are the only two in all those years. And so to me, it has got to be something more than that. I mean, it's obvious wolves that big or dogs that big could easily pounce on a human in the dark in no time. But they don't. They always run off into the nearest cover, whatever that is, whether it's water or usually like a cornfield or a woods or something like that. They're just gone and out of sight.
Are you familiar with the Land Between the Lakes story?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I have no doubt that these creatures could pull off a stunt like that should they care to.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because it was mentioned in chat.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty well known. I just, like I said, I leave it to people who've had more of a chance to really be there and investigate it and have a better handle on it.
Well, that's what I appreciate about your work. You're very forthright, and I like and respect professionalism.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you are very much the professional with your research and your work. So you shared your experience and your husband's. And, we heard our chat room guests' experiences as well. I have a quick question for you following this short break about a specific experience. We'll be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
I would be interested, if you felt up to it, in hearing what you would consider the most bizarre case that you've ever investigated.
Oh, that's kind of easy. That would be the Illinois Wolf Church lady, which happened. It happened in a small church in northern Illinois. I don't have it right in front of me. Maybe 10 years ago. It wasn't just yesterday, but there was a family sitting in church. It was a small church. They had kind of a round seating arrangement. So if you were sitting in the front row, you were directly facing the people in the other end of that bench.
Okay.
And they were sitting. It was a mom and dad. He was a decorated Vietnam veteran. She was just salt of the earth, regular people. She was a housewife, mother of two kids. The two teenage kids were sitting there, and they were just normal, regular teenagers. And they had heard a sermon. The pastor was up there giving the sermon, and this woman came in a little bit late and sat on the other side of the pew from them, in that front pew. So they had a good look at her, and they said they were kind of noticing her through the whole sermon because she was kind of twitching a little. She was just very plain looking. They said you couldn't even describe her features really if you tried, because she just looked like kind of anybody, which was a strange thing to say. And kind of wearing just some simple gray clothing, nothing real attractive or anything, just there. And when the sermon was finished, the minister, as was his habit, picked up his Bible from where it had been sitting and took a few steps, was taking a few steps down to join his family for their hymn part of the service, when all of a sudden this woman leaped up from the seat, screamed this horrible roar, like they said it was just the most horrendous, awful sound you can imagine. And as she did that, it was, to me later thinking about it, was almost as if the sound pulled in what happened. What happened was she was, at least out on the outer side of her, transformed into a wolf form with gray fur, and was extremely like a wolf, except her feet were hooves instead of wolf paws. They were like deer hooves. And the family was like shocked out of their wits. Almost nobody
I would think.
Yeah, almost no one could see her because of the seating arrangement, and because at that time everybody was putting their Bibles away and picking up their hymnals. It was a really good time to do it when nobody was fastened with their eyes fastened up ahead on the pastor. Well, when the sound went, then of course everybody started looking around saying, "What was that? Did you hear that?" Well, right after she transformed, the ushers were still up there on by the podium, and I think 2 or 3 of them, I can't remember the exact number, threw themselves on her. The pastor started reciting verses from the Bible, and right before their eyes, she was all of a sudden that woman again, clothing and all, no ripped clothing, just it was as if this wolf had been projected from her.
Oh my gosh.
I have heard that term, in different little books on training shamans, or, that these things, this sort of appearance is projected by the consciousness or the aura, whatever you want to call it, of the person who is in there. And they helped her off the stage and out of sight. And she was taken where she received some proper care, I was told. And the family was looking around like, what's everybody going to do? Isn't anybody going to do? And everybody was just like confused. The minister was calming people down, told them to go back to look. Nobody really could say for sure what happened, and those who sort of might have wouldn't say anything. So And there's a little more to it. They had some poltergeist activity in the church. The church is no longer there, by the way. It doesn't exist. It was kind of used up by part of another building. And she said the parishioners, it was a small congregation. Many of them were quite old and didn't stay along much longer after that incident happened. So it was like the whole scenario of it disappeared. But they had given me quite a bit of information. And I don't like to print a story like this unless I've investigated it to my utmost. I had 3 different interviews with them, 2 of them in person with my husband along. They never changed their story. The husband drew a really good drawing of what the woman looked like in the Monsters Among Us book. It's printed. Yes. And I couldn't see any indication that they were making it up for any reason. Like I said, they were just regular salt of the earth people, nothing unusual. They gave me a number of facts, which I fact-checked. I found the name of the minister. He didn't want to talk about anything at all to anyone. And so I actually just threw it away because I didn't want anyone else to find that. It's just gone. I don't really remember it. He had a completely different job in a different city, so it would have been difficult anyway. But I did my best. Every single thing they told me in every small detail checked out perfectly, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just one of those.
I could see that being the one that makes you just go,
Yeah.
That's why I do this.
Exactly. And just what that thing was. And the good thing was knowing that the woman was taken to a place with treatment of some kind. I don't know what that would be. There's some things I just don't ask.
I can see that.
Yeah. Either it's too intrusive or I know they're not going to tell me or whatever. Some things I reserve the right to just not want to know some things.
Yes.
So that is,
that's a good policy.
Yeah,
I really think that's a good policy.
You have to maintain a certain degree of self-protectiveness because you don't know what you're dealing with.
Well, you don't.
With these things, they could be very benign. They could be very insidious in ways we don't even understand or couldn't imagine. So, people say, "Well, I want to do what you do," and I'm like, "Are you sure? You really ought to think about it." And you really ought to think about whether you want to see these creatures. When I saw those 3 different Bigfoots, those 3 different times, I never saw the face. It was always positioned in a place where the sun was right behind it or whatever, and it was very like a coal black color. And I think I'm glad for that. I don't know what I would have done if I'd seen the face. It seems like that would have been too much.
Maybe too intimate.
Yeah. To that or to make me manipulate it. I don't know. It just seemed like something that I'm glad I didn't see it. I really, really am. And some people have seen and felt just fine about it and almost euphoric. So people have all different sorts of reactions. And that's just another thing, too. I really respect the witnesses who come to me. They're people who have had an experience. I can't say for sure what it was usually, but if I can validate that they're not the only ones and that they're right if they feel apprehensive. If they feel apprehensive, they should go with their feelings.
I agree. So many people are afraid to.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people feel like if they can't get it out of them and share it, then that's going to be a burden they just are not capable of carrying alone.
It can be very difficult.
I heard someone who is actually a very well-renowned Bigfoot person tell a group that he was lecturing that you only think you want to see this.
That's true. That's really,
it will change your life.
Yeah.
It will alter your reality. You will, in the search to validate what you experienced, because now you know it's real.
Right.
You can lose everything.
That's really true, and I've seen that happen. Yep, he spoke the truth.
And in the next sentence, the same person, well, it wasn't the next sentence, I mentioned about my friend with the dogman encounter. He was like, oh, dogmen are just, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, really? Let's back up a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You didn't go forward with your Bigfoot experience for 2 years because you thought people would think you were insane, and yet you're completely belittling someone else's experience with another cryptid because you haven't seen that one.
People were calling them the snouted Bigfoot for a while.
Yeah.
And I've been pointing out it's a matter of anatomy. You just have to look, and you'll see one's canine, one's primate. They can't be the same thing, you know. So.
And I just was I was kind of disillusioned, right? Because I didn't think that it was right to completely be derogatory of someone else's experience when you were so concerned about yours you wouldn't tell anybody for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was cruel. But, you know, I so appreciate you sharing your expertise. I know that we've gone over what we had scheduled. And by the time I put those breaks in there, it's going to be a bit longer. But it's so awesome. Thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, but that one gentleman was right when he said, you may think you want to see him, but think twice, really, please. And please, always, everybody, be very careful if you're out thinking of these things when you're out in the woods, because we just really don't know, and that's always my final word.
Well, we don't. Thank you for that. And again, if you want to find her page, no www, it is lindagodfrey.com. You can order her books there. You can read her research there. You can do all kinds of fun things there. You can see where she's going to be next. She has a schedule up. And then you can also just follow her. Find her on Facebook.
There's a contact box, too, under About.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you can contact me through that.
And I believe that Lori will be doing that. Sorry
Great.
about that. But thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. And thanks to all of your listeners. I really appreciate everyone that tuned in.
I do too. They're the reason I do this. They're the reason that you do it too.
Exactly.
And I want to tell everyone who's listening that I am aware that we have run over. It's all good. The boss is not going to fire me, hopefully. But, you know, we're in a very traumatic time. No matter what your belief system or who you think is right, wrong, and different. In the grand scheme of things, you get to determine how your day is. So you know what? When you get up, you decide that you're going to have a great day. And then you go out and you manifest that, because you can. We can affect the world. Be the change you want to see. Be the person that you want to be. And realize that other people are doing that too. And let's bring a little healing. 3 years from now, 10 years from now, certainly 50 years from now. That will be what matters. So thank you very much. Go out and have a great week. We will have Denise Pridemore tomorrow night with the Paranormal Pride. I will be back Wednesday with Paranormal Experience Radio with Kat Hobson. Friday will be Paraversal Universe with the Maliks, Jennifer and Kevin, followed by a brand new Ghost Talk Radio with Shelley Burke Robertson. Then I'll be back with Fate with Kathleen Martin. Excuse me. I am so looking forward to that because she does some cool stuff. We will see you then. Until then, have a great week and just be the change. Good night.